All right. Thanks everyone for joining this September 11th for the weekly SIG Windows sync up. Um, so I've got a few status updates that I put on the agenda. If anybody has anything else, just go ahead and either add them or just drop a note in the chat window, and I'll be sure to get to you in a minute. So I think the first thing I wanted to talk about was actually the roadmap over on Trello. So I've been trying to update that basically before we start each milestone, and so I thought it would, since we're in code freeze for 12, I thought it would be good to go ahead and pull this out so we can talk about it for version 13. So let me share this. Okay, are you able to see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Actually, I'll shrink it down a little bit so it'd be easier to stream. Okay. So a couple weeks ago, as we were entering feature freeze, we had the discussion around the stability and test progress and decided that we weren't going to be able to meet the GA criteria for 12. And so what I want to do is really focus 13 on just getting that stability and closing those last issues that we need in order to get stable and within the community. And so what I'd like to propose is basically not doing any of the specific feature work for things like the group managed service accounts and things like that until we get stable on sort of, the core stuff and get those conformance tests running. Does everyone agree with the approach?
I agree 100% with this approach.
Okay.
Obviously, I mean, there's a few people that can't really work on stabilization or getting some of those. So if they can make forward progress on some features, I guess we can't be opposed to that. But
yeah. And so over here at Microsoft, I'm talking to my manager and a few other people, and I'm trying to get a few developers that are more familiar with the Linux side to at least step in and start lending some more help to this so that we can better understand why things are failing here. And when I get back to the notes in a minute, I could show a couple of the failures. But anyway, I think that's kind of the focus that we need right now. And just looking at the incoming issues on GitHub, I'm saying, like, even today, there was we're still getting some issues coming in here. So it's like one of the things I noticed was that there were some cases where, like, the Hyper-V alpha is not working as expected. That's not something that we need for stable, but I noticed there was a new person, Sean. Does anybody know who Sean is?
Yeah, I think he works for Tigera.
Oh, okay. So okay, so he was using Flannel and Calico together. Okay, cool.
Yeah, they're trying to work on network policy enforcement.
Okay.
Cool. We are actively. He also sent me a separate email, so we are actively working on that issue.
Okay, good. Cool. But anyway, like this, I think this is a great example of the kind of things that we need to be focusing on fixing right now. And so, I took the stuff that was incomplete in 12 and moved out to 13 and 14. The one area that I think we may need to do some work is relating to Containerd, and that's the next topic that I had for today. Did anybody have questions about this stuff, or is there anything that you think we need to move over into 13?
So I would like to know what the issues are. Like, is there a way for us to, like, at least go over the top 10 issues or things like that, and then like form a query or something and just track it much more closer?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to get to. The problem right now is that we don't have the issues reproducible. Right now, when you run a test pass, Windows will crash. And it's not happening on the same test case every time. And so this, I linked a doc from Adelina and Claudio, who have been working on porting the conformance tests. But this has got links to all the logs from the nodes and the test pass for several of the recent test runs. And so what you're seeing is that over time, the kubelet goes down one node at a time until the tests basically stop running. Because the way all the conformance tests are written is they're not going to run on any nodes that are down. And the other thing that you'll sometimes see in these logs is that pods will just stop scheduling, or rather they'll be scheduled to a node but not start. And so, it's like what we're looking at now is symptoms, and it's not something that's actionable as the root cause. And so that's where I've been talking to Pengfei and Andy, and they're helping us subdivide this into smaller chunks of tests so that we can basically try to run them until the first failure, stop, hold the cluster, debug, and then actually turn that into a bug that we can track.
Yeah, that will be great, Patrick, because
yeah.
it's unclear what is the action. I mean, we are able to offer the debug help, but yeah, it'll be good to have like a test or a repro step to repro the issue.
Yeah, and so my hope is that between Adelina, Claudio, Pengfei, myself, is that week by week we can get a couple bugs filed until we have a better handle on what the root cause is. And so if anyone else has ideas on how to address this, I'd love to have more help, and especially if anyone's got another idea of an approach to try to find this. I mean, I suppose we could start writing tests from scratch, but I'm kind of hesitant to do that if the tests we already have are breaking stuff.
I mean, I would disagree with that approach, writing new tests, because this is working in Linux, right? So, and we are trying to get in par with Linux. So let's run the same test, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay.
Can Adelina share, perhaps, or someone from Cloudways share a deployment where this is running? I'm trying to run it against an existing cluster as well, using WinCNI. But it would be useful to have an ACS engine cluster as well for us to look at.
Well, I mean, so David, like you've got an Azure subscription, you can create them, right?
Yeah, I can create them.
Okay, so
I'm just not sure what are the exact steps for how to do that, and how do these failing tests map to like specific commands that we can repro them.
Okay,
I think that's a bit what I am a bit unclear about.
I'm trying to find the.
So I saw. So there's this, right? There's this GitHub instructions for how you can run kube test against a cluster manually. Right? Are those the instructions?
Let me check. Yes, that's the instructions.
Okay, so I guess I should try it out first, but
yeah, because you don't have to use Azure to deploy it. You can run this on any cluster you want.
Yeah. So will tell me like how do I know which commands are the ones that are like failing? How do I manually reproduce it once I have like a dashboard?
You basically need to go find that test case over in the Kubernetes repo.
Okay.
The easiest way to do that is usually to search for the title of the test case without the SIG attached.
Okay.
So if I go over here to, I'll just pull one of these random ones. Yes, like here's one where Actually, let me go on. If you go down to the very end of these logs, oh, come on. I probably should not have pulled this up on my thin client. Because these logs are like 16 megs or so. Okay. Yeah, so like if you search for one of these, like, should provide DNS for the cluster, because it's got a few control codes in there, but if you get the majority of that and go over to the Kubernetes repo, come on. Then you can find the test here, because they're basically, well, I'm more into this test E to E, but they're split up basically by SIGs. But you basically you basically just have to go down to the code and then read what it does there, because the code is a documentation. So
perfect. Yeah, thanks so much, Frederick.
No problem.
Just one small note. Be mindful of the fact that it's going to take a regular expression when running the tests. And if what you want to run can match multiple tests, well, you should be wary of that. At the very least, you should include the conformance at the end.
Mm-hmm.
You should match that. Additionally, you can even pass in an argument which basically just runs it as a dry job, which at least will show you which tests are going to be run, which will be extremely useful.
Okay, and that's is that what I have highlighted here?
Yeah, that's the one. So dry run basically means it's just gonna just create the clients and that's it. And you should only use that to see what tests are going to be run.
Okay. Excellent. So did you have any other suggestions working with kubetest here? Like, is this still the recommended binary with all the Windows changes in it? Audio, is this still the same binary that you're using here?
I am using my own binaries, so.
Oh, okay.
It should be fine, in my opinion.
Yeah. And if not, you can build them from here, which has the Windows specific changes in it. So. Okay. All right. So that's sort of, I think that covers most of the specific, or what we're doing from a test standpoint right now. We've got links to those logs there. Okay. Did you have anything else that you wanted to cover from a test standpoint, Claudio or Ben or anybody?
Yeah, there was one issue which I've also reported on the Kubernetes repo. It's regarding the persistent volume claims.
Ah, yes. Okay.
Yeah. Basically, what happens is if you create volumes pods with persistent volume claims, and after which you delete the pods, the kubelet logs are getting filled with errors regarding not being able to unmount the volumes. Basically, it goes for hours and hours. And even if you're running tests which require those persistent volume claims, the tests will hang for a few minutes, several minutes actually, until it times out, waiting for the volumes to get unmounted before finally failing.
Okay.
I still have to add some YAML files which reproduces that exactly, but that's the main gist of it.
Okay. Yeah, so that one's in the Azure file provider. So I just assigned that to the person that owns that one, and so they should be able to take a look at that pretty much right away. And hold on, this one I assigned that to. Okay, that one's assigned to the right person. Okay. All right, that sounds good. Thanks. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to cover was we've got a group of developers that have been working on getting Containerd up and running on Windows, and they're now at a point where they have both Containerd working for being able to pull and run Windows containers, and then they also have it working partially with cry control as well. And so my expectation is that with probably by early October, they should have something that is able to be tested. So one of the issues that we have here is that the Docker shim code is not something that's been it's something that the people are trying to deprecate for the Linux nodes in favor of either using cry containerd or cryo, depending on the vendor. Those seem to be the two most common solutions, as well as Kata. And so I think that if we can move on to Containerd, that may give us some benefits because it's more in line with the active development. So, you know, what I'd like to do there is make sure that this gets brought up in the conformance testing. And so, you know, we've already discussed this with Claudio and Adelina some. So I think we're going to get some tests up and running on that so we can compare. But what I'd like us to do is, you know, once we've fixed some of these stability bugs, I think it would be worth looking to see which is going to be a more stable runtime, Docker shim or Containerd. And so my question for the community is, do we want to take both of these solutions to stable, or do we potentially deprecate Docker shim or just leave that as, you know, like a beta with no intention of graduating it, and then move on to Containerd? Because I know that at some point, you know, the goal is for Containerd to be used as part of the Docker Enterprise Edition on both Linux and Windows. Linux is there today as well. So that would be a path for us to move forward off of the Docker 1706 and 1803 releases that we're using today, and then be able to keep more current there. So did anybody have any thoughts there on the Containerd effort?
So
I think what you're, go ahead.
I see in your notes, I'm not sure if you just said this, but if, Containerd requires Windows Server 2019. Can you elaborate a little more on that?
Yeah. So in Windows Server 2019, this they're using an updated HCS service. And so if you look at the Microsoft /HCS shim repo, you'll see that they actually have a slightly different API endpoint there. One of the main things that they did for this release in Windows Server, and you know, these changes actually started in 1803, was they separated out the API so they could better support creating a sandbox like we need for Kubernetes. And so the API that Windows uses underneath is much more similar to the CRI, and that means that things like being able to do Hyper-V isolated pods with multiple containers per pod will be feasible, because you can basically create the sandbox and the network namespaces separately from starting the containers. So it gives us a much more cleaner architecture that's in line with what's on Linux. But because there's substantial changes to these services, it doesn't necessarily work on the older versions of Windows Server, because this code, of course, is a year and a half newer. And it was intended from the beginning to better meet the needs of Kubernetes.
So is that the sort of the crux of this decision? Like, are there people who are going to want Kubernetes on 1803 and earlier?
Mm-hmm.
And for them,
yeah,
they support Docker shim?
Yeah.
I mean, for me personally, and for the few customers we've talked to, I don't think starting with Server 2019 would be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm guessing maybe the OVN, OVS folks have a different opinion.
Wait, so Patrick, we are announcing GA for Kubernetes on Windows Server 1803 in 2019, right?
Well, so for Docker shim, we had proposed 1803 in 2019 because that's what the current testing base was, and we knew there were problems in 1709.
Mm-hmm.
So if we move to Containerd, we would need to say Server 2019 only.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to ask. If that's I guess is the bigger question that we need to establish.
Yeah. So my concern here is that, if we try to run and support 2 runtimes, we may not be able to do it with the number of people that we have available. That's what my concern comes down to. And if there's more developers improving the stability of Containerd, then I think that we would have a better chance of success there. And so once those tests are up and running, I'd like us to look at the data and say, does this make sense, or do we go down a path where we're having to fix a lot of bugs that are specific to Docker shim? And so at this point we don't have any data, but it's a question that I'd like us to be thinking about and probably make a decision on sometime in October once we have test results in hand.
Okay, yeah. Sounds good to me.
And I don't know how the Docker integration with Containerd is going yet. I haven't talked to anybody about that.
We are also at least my team and David and are working on moving CNI also to adapt that model. So there will be updates on CNI, kubelet, kubeproxy also for this work.
Is there there's additional HNS platform work that we also need to do, right? Will that happen in Windows Server 2019, or will that be ready?
Yeah, so the platform work is there. It's just a backports, bug fixes has to be backported.
Okay.
But there will be kubelet, HCS shim, and kubeproxy changes to adopt this model. But we will support both creating Argon containers on the host, also this new model of sandboxes as the utility VM, and then creating multiple Argon containers inside that utility VM. And we will conform to this model, Linux model, where you will be able to create a namespace as part of the runtime, and CNI will add endpoints to that namespace.
Now for some of these PRs and the Kubernetes bits, do you have a link for those so that we can track those perhaps?
Yes. Yes, I think in general, I probably need some help in pushing the PRs as well. There is a container networking PR that's been pending for a long time. So there are people who can help getting that in, because there are a lot of PRs, pending PRs on top of that.
Is that the one I'm getting the CNI plugin?
Yes. So we have Ben Moss and Rosen, I forgot the other person's name, but they have approved it. But we need one more approval from the maintainers.
I see.
I posted it in chat. But yeah, this one has been open for a long time now, and it's like a huge PR by now.
But we want to merge this so that people have container networking plugins for Windows available, so that they can take it and run it with their own environment.
Yeah, because right now we have like pre-built binaries that we're letting people use, and it's not an ideal situation.
Yeah.
It's not maintainable.
Yeah. But like once this is there, all the other CNI plugins should be easier, because we could rebase like Flannel and the Azure plugins on top of this.
Yes.
Because this would handle the Windows specific API calls, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, we'll have to keep pushing on that. Okay. Did anybody have anything else for today? That's the end of my list here.
Maybe there's some problems right now with the Flannel startup scripts. Sometimes it just fails to launch Flannel-D on Windows nodes.
Okay.
So I don't know what has caused it. I do know that it has reliably worked on Kubernetes 1.10, and since then we've had some code changes to our startup scripts, and obviously the Kubernetes versions have changed as well. I think that there's something that happened in the recent Flannel PRs that went in, but basically, if Flannel-D doesn't launch after you ran start.ps1, then there's a command that you can use to kick it back into place, just basically running it manually. So I'll try to post that in chat.
Okay. And can you update that in the troubleshooting docs that you have?
Yeah, I'm actually updating our official MSDN docs, so I'll make sure it's included there.
Okay, excellent.
So here's the command. Oh, looks like half of it went off. 1 second. Okay.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, that's. I think that's it then. Is that everything you had, David?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone, and hopefully we'll have some more specifics after the testing next week, so we can figure out what areas need to be worked on next. So, all right. Well, thanks everyone, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.